Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Welcome to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed, and tonight we have a particularly distinguished guest on our show. He is Dick Saslaw, the Virginia Senator from the 35th District. He is also the Senate Minority Leader. Thank you so much for joining me,
Catherine,
Senator Saslaw.
Thank you for having me on the show tonight.
So, Medicaid expansion has been in the news, the budget has been in the news, and I know that there's a lot of things that you'd like to cover tonight to help people understand exactly what we're talking about and what the issues are. So can you start by explaining the biennium budget? Not every state has the same budget process, but this is what Virginia does.
In Virginia, we have what's called the biennium budget. We set a budget for 2 years, and we're doing it now. It'll take effect starting July 1st, 2018, and run through June 30th, 2020. Now, next year, when we go back into the 2019 session, as things change, we alter the budget. So it gives us a chance to, fashion it to fit the unfolding conditions. And then in 2020, when we go back, we will have both a new biennium budget and what's called the caboose budget. That brings that 6 months up to date prior, from January 1st, 2020 to June 30th. So that's how that works. What's happened is everything has gotten bogged down in the Senate as a result of Medicaid expansion. About all 19 Democrats are in favor of Medicaid expansion, and at least publicly now 2 Republicans, which is enough to pass it. The problem is that no budget has been voted out of committee since the governor sent one down when we couldn't reach an agreement during the 2018 session. So the Senate, the process is stalled in the Senate Finance Committee. If there's no meeting by 2:30 tomorrow afternoon when we're scheduled to go back in, then either I or Senator Hanger will move to discharge the Senate Finance Committee. We don't have any choice. It's something that neither one of us would prefer to do, but A, we can't let the state shut down July 1st, and there are somewhere close to 400,000 people who would be eligible to get health insurance who can't unless we pass Medicaid expansion. So this is what is got us where we are today, and we hope to start unraveling it all tomorrow and have it done by no later than Wednesday.
So Medicaid expansion, some people may not even understand what that encompasses. So let's go back to the Affordable Care Act, which was a signature piece of legislation under the Obama administration. The fact that it provided for coverage for people who fall into this gap of not being the very poorest, but not necessarily having the means to buy health coverage on the marketplace.
They make too much for Medicaid, and
not enough to buy their own private insurance.
And not enough to buy their own private insurance. So for a single person, you can earn up to $16,000, which is 138% of the poverty level, federal poverty level, and still qualify for Medicaid expansion. The federal government pays 90% of that. The state ultimately pays 10%. Except because of the way we're structuring this with an assessment on various hospitals. On the hospitals, it's called a provider assessment tax, more or less. The hospitals will wind up paying our 10%. So it's not going to cost the state anything. On top of that, as a result of us not having it in the budget, and the House having it in the budget, their K through 12 budget was $170 million more than ours, and their higher education budget was $106 million more than ours, because we had to then go back and pull other monies out as a result. And this just doesn't make any sense. This is one of the things that drives tuition up when you don't take advantage of these programs. The other thing is that the people who are currently on Medicaid, that's 50-50. The state pays 50%, the federal government pays 50%. Why you wouldn't want to switch to 90-10 is beyond me, because some of the people who are currently, the working poor, who are currently on Medicaid could go on to Medicaid expansion, which is 90-10. Federal government pays 90, we or the hospitals pay the other 10%. That's a far better deal for the state than the 50-50.
Now, we are considered, I believe, one of the most frugal states when it comes to...
We have one of the lowest reimbursement rates of any state in America.
Yes, we do. And so help our viewers understand that the money that's been paid in, that 90% that's coming from the federal government, is money Virginia taxpayers have paid into the system since it started.
There's a surcharge on stock sold for people who make over a certain amount of money, and more or less an income tax premium, if you may. And we're paying that in, but we're not getting Medicaid expansion. The other states are living off of our money.
Right, and that's like 32 states now?
32 states have passed Medicaid expansion, plus the District of Columbia, and 18 states have not. And hopefully when we're finished by this week, it'll be 33 and 17.
Right. Yeah, because so Virginians over the years have paid taxes into this fund.
Since 1912. Since 2012.
It feels like 1912, but it is 2012. And so we have not gotten, so this now is in probably the billions of dollars, because it's millions of dollars, I think, on a fairly regular basis.
We've just given away a ton of money. And the argument that you hear, which doesn't make a shred of sense, and I'll tell you why in a second, is that, oh, what happens if the federal government withdraws from the program? We're now stuck with that. Well, that's not true for two reasons. Number one, the U.S. Supreme Court has ruled that the federal government cannot mandate this on the states. That was a U.S. Supreme Court decision.
Right.
And when they upheld the ACA. And number two, in our bill, as is in all these other bills, is a kill switch. If the federal government withdraws, we terminate the program, period.
Right, but for all these years, we haven't had the program.
No.
So for all of these years, people have gone without the coverage.
And for 3 years, we could have gotten 100 to 0. In other words, the first 3 years, they paid 100%. Then every year, it dropped 2% until it gets to 90%.
Yeah.
So there were 3 years that it was 100% that they would have paid.
Right, so this makes no sense. And to your point, once we have money coming in to offset the cost of providing this coverage, that frees up more money to do these other things that we are talking about.
These other things, that's right.
So people need to understand that when we talk about the Affordable Care Act, it's also called Obamacare.
That's correct.
They're one and the same. Not everybody understands that.
No, and in one poll, it showed that 34% of the people liked Obamacare, and like 50–60% did not, but more than 53% liked the Affordable Care Act.
Right. So what happened with the Supreme Court decision, though, is that unlike the original architecture of this legislation, states were allowed to opt in. That's kind of where it all fell apart, because a lot of states at this point, more than half the states have opted in, but still it's been a slow progress.
Yes, it has.
To get more than 50% of the states to opt in. And so this is where we are now, and hopefully we are on the cusp of this major decision that will provide greater care for more people in Virginia, provide money from the federal government, and free up money for the other things in the budget that are priorities.
That's correct. I and others, I was the one that came up with the so-called, as the newspapers have called it, the nuclear option. You hate to do that. That's not the best way to do things, but we have no choice. And unless they vote out a budget, any budget, because we would amend it on the floor and we have the votes, we have no choice.
Right, and so this is all parliamentary procedure, and this is something other people, our viewers may not understand either, is how the committee systems work, and how once a budget is passed in the House, it's got to match the one that's passed in the Senate.
Or
otherwise
it
goes to conference.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to see that happen.
No, so what we're going to do, we've already negotiated what amendments are acceptable to the House, and one of the amendments that's going to be in there is in the original budget submitted by Governor McAuliffe, it called for a 2% raise for teachers effective December 1st, 2019. I'm moving the date, which was in the House budget, to July 1st, 2019, but what I'm doing is we're bumping it up to 3% instead of 2%. And both the Virginia Education Association and the American Federation of Teachers are very happy with this.
Right, because a budget, at the end of the day, a budget is about priorities. They speak to what people care about. And for a long time, too long, teachers have not had a raise, state employees have not had a raise.
We need to pay the teachers a lot better than what we've been doing. We are, on a per capita basis, I think the 9th or 10th wealthiest state in America. We're 30th on what we pay the average, what the average teacher makes in Virginia, which in a NEA study, National Education Association, was $50,000 for the average salary. And if you pull Planning District 8, which is Northern Virginia, out of the equation, we dropped to 48th, and we're down there with Oklahoma and West Virginia. But what's more interesting is average salary for a teacher versus the average salary statewide for employees. The average income in Virginia for a full-time employee is $62,000 a year, and it's $50,000 for the teachers. That means that we are 78% of what the average salary is. Let me tell you where that ranks us in America. We are 50th, dead last.
You know, and that impacts, when we start talking about jobs in the economy and workforce development, workforce readiness, all of that starts in our school systems across the entire Commonwealth of Virginia.
Correct.
So it's an investment, and people really need to see this as an investment.
Well, and what we're doing is, you know, one of the things in workforce development is we're marrying the community college system, which my wife is she's the outgoing chair of the community college board. But we're marrying that with, with training. So when these people finish community college, if A, they don't want to go to a 4-year school, or they just are not suited for that, they at least now have a trade that can give them a career. And a well-paying career.
Absolutely.
Right.
It's a certification program, correct?
Right, that's correct.
So, and if you don't know, we've got 23 community colleges in the Commonwealth of Virginia. That's more community colleges than a lot of other states around the United States. It's a built-in infrastructure of educating and developing our workforce. And we are going to talk with Senator Dick Saslaw more about that when we return from this break.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, Hard, what's this?
That's my resignation. You're resigning.
Why? You've been putting me under a lot of pressure lately. That's why I'm ready to quit.
Oh, I forgot. I'll do better. Please don't quit on me.
Don't let your heart quit on you. Get your uncontrolled high blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late.
So you can't save money? That's easy as pie. Brown bagging lunch instead of going out. $6 save times 5 days a week times 10 years is $21,000. That's a lot of lettuce. Small changes today, big bucks tomorrow. Feedthepig.org.
Did you know kids who play outdoors have healthier lungs?
Totally.
I did. Did you know that boys that play with dolls make better husbands?
My son has lots of dolls. But did you know terry cloth diapers breathe better?
I did.
It's totally true.
Oh, yeah.
Did you know that strollers have the right of way on the sidewalk?
Yes.
Yep, I did. Did you guys
Did you know that kids who eat breakfast have higher GPAs?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. That's actually what I was going to say.
Did you know babies should never touch silver? It's really bad for them.
I knew that.
Did you guys know that statistically friendly kids have more friends?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's obvious.
Did you know most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Joining me tonight is the Senate Minority Leader, Senator Dick Saslaw. Thank you so much for being here. And let's talk a little bit, we were talking about community colleges, but let's talk about the issue of guns in our educational institutions. We've just had another school shooting in Santa Fe, Texas. You know, we had the tragedy in Virginia Tech back in 2007. What is happening both on the state level, which you have some control over, and on the federal level, where something really needs to be done about how we deal with guns in schools?
Well, let's deal with the state level, since I have no say at the federal level. And ultimately, if we're going to get serious about this, something has to be done at the federal level, because you can't do this on a state-by-state basis. As you know, we had the Virginia Tech shooting. 33 people, including the shooter, died that day. Guns are just too accessible in our society. Let me hit you with a statistic. The United States is 4.4% of the world's population. We are 43% of all the guns in circulation on this planet not held by the military or police forces. 4% of the population, 43% of the guns not held by the military or police. That's the problem. And
that is the problem, and it's also a constitutional problem, because the reason we have a proliferation is the Second Amendment.
Well, and that all hinged on the Heller decision. But what in the Heller decision, they were somewhat careful. They didn't open it up for everything. And what's interesting is some of the New England states that are in the Second Circuit have banned assault weapons. Now, AR-15 is not an assault style. AK-47 is. They banned high-capacity magazines. They started universal background. They've done a whole lot of things. And the Second U.S. Circuit has upheld all of these laws, and the U.S. Supreme Court has refused to take the cases. So ultimately, if you have a split in the circuits, then ultimately the Supreme Court would have to get involved. But this is a problem. This is a national problem. And here in Virginia, in the last session, more than 40 bills were put in to try to effect some form of control, not banning or outlawing guns, but controlling, a little better control, universal background checks, ban on bump stocks, or items that can, or equipment that can accelerate the firing rapidity of a gun. We need to do a whole lot more. Universal background checks, the banning on anything that can accelerate the trigger mechanisms. We also need, excuse me, to raise the purchasing age to 21, like they did in Florida.
Right.
And the other thing that we need to do is ban the sale in Virginia of high-capacity magazines.
Isn't some of this, though, a mindset issue in that, you know,
We've been unable to do this. If we can get control of both the House and the Senate with a Democrat in the governor's mansion, we can affect all of this, and that would be my highest priority.
I understand that, but I think the public also has to be on our side. And I've heard Dr. Bassam Khan talk about gun violence is a public safety issue.
That's correct.
You know, he talks about how smoking and deaths related to smoking were affected when we made policies around who could buy cigarettes, how old you had to be, where you could smoke, and the same with car safety. You know, we reduced the number of vehicular deaths because people have to be licensed to drive them. We have safety regulations around cars.
There's no required safety thing for guns.
And that's what I'm saying. And
right.
so if isn't the public mindset really have to turn away from arguing about the Second Amendment and talking about gun violence that's killing our children as a public health issue? I mean, if this was a germ killing 10 children a day, wouldn't we all be in a lather to find the cure for it? So to me, I just think we're somehow arguing over the wrong thing.
The other thing is that you've got 51 Republicans in the House and 21 in the Senate. And with that, the committee makeup, those bills go to courts of justice. There's 9 Republicans and 6 Democrats. And they all died there except for one which went to Senate Finance, and it died there. And
So
why you had a, I think it was the Bumstock bill, why you had that going to Senate Finance, I guess they figured they had a better chance of killing it there, where it was 11 Republicans and 5 Democrats. Keep in mind, we're only down 21-19, yet these committees are just lopsided the other way.
Well, and that's why I wanted to, so we're going to take a little moment here to have a civics lesson about how the Virginia legislature works. So even though there's a majority of 1 in the Senate and there's a majority of 2 in the Senate, so the Republicans, by a very, very narrow margin, control both chambers of the House.
That's correct.
But the Speaker of the House is in charge of committee assignments. So as long as
and where the bills go.
Right, and so as long as the Speaker of the House, Kirk Cox, is a Republican, because his party is in the majority.
That's correct.
Then these bills that we're talking about, no matter how well they're crafted or how much sense they may make, they're never going to get on the floor for a floor vote because of how the committees are apportioned as to Republicans and Democrats, and where the bills are sent and to which committees.
If they don't think the committee will kill a bill they want killed, they send it to rules. In the Senate, it's the same thing. The reason the Equal Rights Amendment went to rules was because they knew that it would be voted out of committee if it went to privileges and elections. Jill Vogel has consistently voted for the Equal Rights Amendment, and it would have come out. So they sent it to rules where they knew they could kill it. And it's just outrageous.
You know, I agree with you. We have actually got somebody who's left a message for us on our YouTube channel and wants to know what you recommend that private citizens do to push for better education funding. What does the average Virginian need to do besides vote?
Well, you got to elect people who think K through 12 is a high priority and not private schools.
And that's both at the state level and the local level, correct?
Both, well, yes, both, but at the state, the fact is we don't have enough revenue. We did, back in the late 90s, Jim Gilmore ran on no car tax. $950 million comes off the top every year. Comes off the top every year. And keep in mind, that's about $300 million out of K through 12 statewide. And we never made that money up. We didn't raise any taxes to do that. The K through 12 budget is where it was in 2008, except you're now, 10 years later, you've got more students plus inflation. And we're not taking that into consideration, and we need to do that. We simply need more revenue. People say to me, why does college tuition keep going up the way it is? The reason is nobody wants to, you know, if you're not going to pay any more taxes, this is a problem that we have. We can't run the government for free. I wish we could, but we can't. And we have to come, sooner or later, you're going to have to create a General Assembly that's going to come to grips with that and bite the bullet. And you don't have to raise the taxes, you know, very, very much. It would help if you quit, you know, you've got Republicans are putting in bills to constantly cut the income tax. Our income tax is one of the states that have an income tax is one of the lowest ones around. This fellow who's a senator from, he lives in Chesterfield County now, Sturtevant, put in one that would have cut almost 20% from the general fund, which would have just gutted the schools.
Right.
And would have probably caused the closure of some schools in rural areas.
Well, I'm going to throw something in here because I'm surprised at how people are like, less government, small government, and no taxes. But how do you fund the things you want? And so people scream about the toll roads. Scream about the toll roads. Why do we have to pay these tolls?
Because nobody wants to raise the gas tax.
Correct. And so it's a budget. It's a budget. There's income, there's outgo. And you have to decide what your priorities are.
Well, they have to be, in Virginia, unlike the federal government, it has to be balanced. We can't.
That is a good point.
We cannot have an unbalanced budget. So that's the point. Our state gasoline tax is 16.1 cents. It's like the third or fourth lowest in America. This nationwide gasoline tax average for states is about 31 cents a gallon. So we're 15 cents below the average. North Carolina, I think, is 33 or 34 cents, which puts them 18 cents higher than ours. Well, and by the way, that 18 cents does not translate into the gasoline being 18 cents more expensive, because apparently the major oil companies don't permit wide state-by-state separation. Their average price for regular unleaded gasoline, and you can go on Gas Buddy and check this, most weeks runs about 5 to 10 cents higher than ours, not 18, 5 to 10, which means we're subsidizing the roads in North Carolina.
Right.
West Virginia's is 32 or 33, Maryland's at 30, DC's at 30, they're all going up. For years, New Jersey was at 13, they're on their way to 37, we're at 16.
So
and
we're
you
lagging
wonder
behind.
The reason, and if we're going to build roads, widen roads, do anything, the only way you can do it is public-private partnerships, which I'm not keen on.
I'm not keen either.
And that's the only way we can raise the money, and that's how you wind up with the hot lanes. And you know, a lot of the people who complain about the tolls are the same people who are right saying don't raise the gas tax.
Right, and you can't have it both ways.
No,
I don't
you can't.
understand why people don't understand. You cannot have it both ways.
No,
you
that's
can't
correct.
have all the things you want. Good schools, good roads, you know, good public safety, but you don't want to, where does the money come from?
I had many years ago, I had a delegate tell me everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die.
There you go. It's kind of the same
Okay.
thing. Everybody wants great roads. Nobody wants to pay the taxes. Nobody wants to pay the tolls.
No.
But, you know, transportation means a lot of different things throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia. And, you know, there is part of the, sort of the hurdle that has to be gotten over is the transportation bill that was sent down from the governor's office.
Well, I had the bill. He sent the amendments down.
He sent the amendments down.
Yeah, I got through the 154 million that, you know, the LaHood Commission said that we were going to have to come up with $5 billion over 10 years, which is $500 million a year by Maryland, Virginia, and D.C.
I want you to hold that thought, because when we come back from this break,
Okay, I'll explain.
Senator Saslaw is going to explain the transportation funding bill and where we are with it and why it matters, particularly here in Northern Virginia, where we rely on the metro system and we rely on the cooperation between Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. So please join us after this break.
Art, a universal language, an expression of culture, of self. And now, thanks to Empowered Women International, a way for emerging and established immigrant and refugee artists and artisans to find hope to earn a living while enriching the lives of all of us. Empowered Women International, making a better America every day. For more information on Empowered Women International's educational programs, or to make a tax-free donation, contact cfrip@aol.com.
Here, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. Here, kitty, kitty.
You'd think it would be easy to tell which kids have trouble with their eyesight. But that's not always the case. Even though 1 in 4 children may have a vision problem, eye doctors tell us the symptoms aren't always so obvious. We do know that 80% of all childhood learning is visual. And without good vision, kids can have trouble learning to read and may fall behind in school. For clues on how to spot the real-life signs of childhood vision problems and what parents can do, visit checkyearly.com. A public service message from the Vision Council of America and Reading is Fundamental.
we're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Welcome back to Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Catherine Reed. Joining me tonight is Senator Dick Saslaw. And when we went to break, we were talking about the transportation funding bill, which is of great interest to people here in Northern Virginia. We have higher traffic, more roads, and a greater dependence on both public transportation as well as well-maintained roads. So tell us what we can expect to see out of this transportation bill.
The LaHood Commission, as I said prior to the break, recommended that we needed to bring it up to date. It needed $5 billion over 10 years, or $500 million a year. Our share is $154 million a year. Maryland's is $167, and DC is $179. And it's based on track mileage and stations. And so my bill got it up to $154 million. The unfortunate thing was that all this money is coming from local governments and mostly through the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority money, which was created in the 2013 transportation bill of former Speaker House, which raised some taxes to help pay for that. Well, the bill that I got out of the Senate had a 1% increase in the transient occupancy tax, which meant that, which is paid in Northern Virginia, which is paid for 90-some% of people who don't even live in Virginia. And what that increase from 2 to 3%, it's existing right now at 2%, that 1% means that on a $100 hotel bill, it would add $1 to the bill. The other was the grantor's tax. I had it going up from 15 cents to 25, which meant that on a sale of $1 million home, it would add $1,000. Now, to put that in perspective, if you went into Home Depot and bought $1 million worth of supplies, the sales tax would be $60,000.
Right.
This $1 million sale would result in $1,000. Right. Well, we couldn't get it through the House. So the governor sent down a compromise amendment. He kept the 1%, and then we dropped the grantor's tax to instead of going from 15 to 25, 15 to 20. The realtors in Northern Virginia fully supported it. They fully supported it.
That's amazing.
Yet,
that's a statement.
A delegate from out in the Centerville area, Tim Hugo, whose area desperately needs road construction, desperately, he fought it and convinced and succeeded in getting the other 50 Republicans to vote against it. And as a result, instead of getting $30-some million worth of new money, it's coming out of Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, which is his road building money.
Right.
It's his road building money for his district. They're going to lose all this. So anyway, that was a major disappointment. But we got the $154 million. If we take over, I will change the mechanism for funding that $154 and put that money back, so the people who live out there can get that done. Coming down the pike, as you know, will be the hot lanes or high occupancy toll lanes outside the Beltway. Aubrey Lane, as Secretary of Transportation, he's now Secretary of Finance, Aubrey negotiated a fabulous deal with this consortium. And at settlement, they're going to give us a check for $500 million. That money will be used up here for transportation improvements. And people are going to start to see, a lot of changes. And we've got, the Metro, the Silver Line is going to Ashburn, will open 2021 or 2022.
And to the international airport, our international airport,
Dulles.
one of the only international airports in the world that doesn't actually have public transportation.
That's correct.
Yeah, 50 years later.
Hopefully this will be a selling point to Amazon. We've got Amazon, we got Apple that are interested in this. Amazon, in their criteria, was mass transit, the workforce, and an international airport. We can put them within a mile of each.
Right.
Or closer. We can actually put them within walking distance of each.
Right. And when we do that, and we are working on bringing companies, you know, Nestle is in Roslyn, Gerber is joining them. We're looking at, Apple's looking around, Amazon's looking around. And it's not just big companies moving in, which would certainly boost the economy in our area in Northern Virginia, but it's creating workforce development and providing the necessary building blocks for people to grow their businesses
well,
here.
We're bringing in, you know, one of the biggest shortages that we've been told we have is truck drivers.
Really?
Is truck drivers, guys that can drive those tractor trailers. And we're gonna fix that problem. And also, we're going to be using community colleges and tying that into the manufacturing needs as part of the workforce.
Industries.
Specific industries
right.
through workforce development that will mate the training programs at the community college with the job needs on the outside. And, you know, not everybody, you know, needs a 4-year degree or wants a 4-year degree. Some of the people want, you know, to do other things. You know, take me, I had a degree in economics from the University of Maryland, wound up owning gasoline stations in Virginia and Maryland. And,
there you go.
You know, you never know how it's going to be, but we need to mate the people with the jobs. In the field of cybersecurity, I've been told that we have as many as 80,000 vacancies in this state. These are high, or 50,000 vacancies. These are high-paying jobs, averaging $80-some thousand a year. You know, we need to do something about that. And in this new budget, by the way, we got some of the money. All of it was going to go to Virginia Tech. We're going to be having some of it come up here to George Mason, which it really is one of their specialties. So this. There's a whole lot that we're doing in a lot of fields, but in transportation, you know, we've got to, nobody has ever built their way out of a traffic jam.
Right.
You know, ultimately, we got to get people out of the cars. This is coming, by the way, from a guy who did fairly well in the
gas station business, right?
In the gasoline business. But ultimately, if we're going to be successful as an area and as a region, we got to get people out of the cars. They got to. You know, but we got to supply them a transit system which is reliable and safe.
Right.
And if not, they're going to use the car.
And I know that Credeeds had sent something out too, pointing out that, you know, robbing from the Northern Virginia Transportation Fund to make up our obligation for Metro funding only means that we're robbing Peter to pay Paul, in that you're now shifting around what money is left.
The Post wrote a very accurate editorial on that. And in fact, what should have alarmed those Republican delegates that voted against that is that if we have to go get money, you know, we may have to go get money now from the state fund, and under the scoring system that we use,
right.
The Northern Virginia roads are going to score a lot higher because of the demand than projects around the state.
Right.
And the Republicans that voted against that, they're going to lose. It's going to cost them money for their area.
I know, and that makes no sense to me.
No,
you know, as you say, you've got to grow revenues. You've got to grow
correct.
revenues. So the money's got to come from somewhere.
That's correct.
And so looking at, you know, transportation infrastructure and the Silver Line going out to Loudoun County, that's where a lot of growth, I think, in the future is going to be.
Right.
And, you know, we need to also look at housing. And I know that affordable housing is a huge crisis. It's everywhere in this country. And there are places.
The biggest is California. California has 25% of the nation's homeless.
I know. And Seattle has just put a tax on the big corporations, and there was a lot of press about that. But how else do you create affordable housing for people who are working, by the way?
Right.
If you don't create a system you know, they're going to build like 600 affordable housing units in Seattle that will be funded by this new tax on companies like Amazon and Google. And, you know, at some point, as we grow the economy in Virginia, as we grow the economy in Virginia, people have to look differently at our biennium budget. You know, first of all, we have to balance our budget. The second thing I want to talk about is our triple bond rating. I mean, we have got an outstanding credit rating as
AAA rating.
Yeah, you know, and we want to maintain that. So people, I think, The average person who looks at their tax bill or when they pay taxes really has to think differently about those tax dollars being invested in the future of the Commonwealth and its roads and its workforce developments. Higher education is K through 12.
There's a whole lot of things that we need, but we can't do it without money.
Yeah.
It's that simple. And you got competing demands now, and you don't have the money to pay for it. And I had years ago a lobbyist organization, an organization that the lobbyist told me that one of the delegates came in and he asked him, how are you going to pay for roads? And he says, we'll cut the fat out of the VDOT budget. And this lobbyist told him, he says, that may sell in your district, but not here, get out.
Right, so messaging, how important is messaging when the Republicans sort of feel like their base wants them to talk about, tax cuts, lower taxes, smaller government, and Democrats
and money for private schools.
Yeah, right.
Tax credits.
But the economy tends to do well under Democratic administrations.
Does extremely well.
Because we are investing money in the things that make an economy grow, the things that create jobs, the things that give people a place to live and a good quality of life. Is our problem the way we message these issues?
That's part of it. And you've got to run people who appeal to a large segment of the voting population. Let's say one is liberal, 10 is conservative, or one is conservative and 10 is liberal. Like 80% of the voters lie between 4 and 6.
Right.
And if you put up a candidate who can only appeal to, 30 and below or 70 and above, you got a big problem. And you need to put up people who have broad appeal. I can remember when Nixon got elected president. I remember all the chatter. We need to run somebody that's totally in line with our base. Hubert Humphrey was one of the founding members of the Americans for Democratic Action. By any stretch of the imagination, he was a liberal Democrat. Well, the reaction was to put up George McGovern. Well, he did real well against Nixon, who had an approval rating where Trump's is now. McGovern did manage to win one state, Massachusetts. Then when Reagan got elected, if you remember, Kennedy challenged Carter and he considerably weakened him.
Right.
People, said Carter's too conservative. Well, when Carter got beat by Reagan, they said we need to run somebody in line with our base. They put up Mondale. He did very well. He won one state plus the District of Columbia.
Well, I want you to hold that thought, because when we come back, one of the things I want to discuss with Senator Saslaw is gerrymandering and the concept of cracking and packing. Join us when we return.
One day these rats were playing in the woods. Well, it's a matches and that's no good. Listen to smoke before you give it a try. Only you. Don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Cause there's nothing very funny about nothing very nice on a homeless mind. So if a gorgeous force is what you desire, don't play with matches. Don't play with fire. Yeah.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Fire.
Why don't you just wash your car at home? When I wash my car, everything runs down the street and down into the storm drains. With all the chemicals in the soaps and waxes, the last thing I want to do is poison my own drinking water.
At least here, it's all contained and recycled on site.
That's why I also take my car in for oil changes instead of doing it myself. I might take a chance on spilling stuff.
You know what the best part is? What? More time to kick back and watch the game.
How far would you go to protect the planet?
I want you to build an ark.
Here we go. Okay, that's good. Oh, okay. Ow!
Maybe there's another way.
People! The flood is imminent! Is it too much to ask for a little precipitation?
Go to fightglobalwarming.com to find out what you and your community can do to reduce global warming pollution.
Somewhere around the world, there are men and women of the armed forces risking their lives, helping rebuild communities after natural disasters. collecting toys for needy children, tutoring kids in school. These are your sons and daughters who work to keep us safe, secure, and free. Dedicated men and women who put their country first.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
This is our final segment with Senator Dick Saslaw, who is the Senate Minority Leader here in Virginia's General Assembly. So let's talk a little bit about, you were talking about running moderate candidates and how candidates are seen by the general electorate. One of the things that we haven't talked about is the whole primary. We are coming up on primaries here in Virginia for congressional races on June 12th. But we've seen tremendous polarization over the last 10 years in how...
Well, it's longer than that.
Longer than that. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think you really saw it with the rise of the Tea Party. With the rise of the Tea Party, and you got people who were like challenging...
It actually started in the 90s.
Yeah.
Before the Tea Party.
So
it was moving in that direction with the Contract for America that Gingrich had,
Right.
and that it had already started to move in that direction.
So how do we overcome that when you got, fringe candidates in both parties who are looking at primaries in very safe districts?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with an independent, commission drawing these boundaries, but you have to be very careful on how you word what the criteria is. And as you notice, the governor vetoed that redistricting bill of suitor lines because he knew what he was doing. He set the criteria, and that would really make it hard for us to ever get in the majority, and that's why the governor vetoed it. If it's, if you could fashion and you're going to have, by the way, you're going to have to do a constitutional amendment,
right? Because
in 2004, as a result of some mid-session or actually midterm resignations, Warren Barry went to work for the Warner administration. He was in the state Senate. Madison Marie retired before his term expired. And so the question came up, since we had already redistricted in 2001, do they run in the new district or the old district? And we got a constitutional amendment through, which I think says you run in the new district. The existing legislator doesn't have to move,
right?
But he can serve out his term. But it said in there, the General Assembly shall redistrict itself in 2011 and every 10 years thereafter.
Right.
It said the General Assembly shall redistrict itself. So we're going to have to change the Constitution.
But doesn't the Constitution also say, theoretically, that the district should be compact and contiguous?
Yes, and there's been a lawsuit filed by 2021. Wyatt Durrett filed it. He was a Republican nominee for Attorney General in '81 and lost to Belials. He was a Republican nominee for governor in '85 against Belials and lost. He filed that lawsuit. We had quite a few people look at that, including George Barker, who was an expert on that,
right,
as well as outside people. They said that on the criteria that he used, we would be down we'd be down, instead of 21-19, 25-15, okay? One even said 26-14, forever, okay? Well, he went into court under our compact and contiguous clause. During the 2011 redistricting, the Democrats were in control in the Senate, the Republicans were in the House, and I can't speak for the Republican, plan.
Right.
Our lawyer was Jerry Hebert. He headed the Voting Rights Division for 10 years under both Democratic and Republican presidents. All 40, Catherine, all 40 of our Senate districts met the scoring system of the Voting Rights Act for compact and contiguous.
All right.
Let me repeat that. All 40 of our districts met the scoring system under the Voting Rights Act for compact and contiguous. Again, I'm willing to support independent commission, but you've got to draw, the bill should be one that both parties agree to, okay, that, doesn't favor one over the other, which is what, the people who want independent commission say, doesn't favor one over the other, and you truly have an independent group. You'll have to change the Constitution. Now, in order to change the Constitution in Virginia, it has to pass through the General Assembly twice with an intervening election of the House of Delegates in between. We're finished with the 2018 session. The 2019 session will still have the same makeup as the 18. We've been unable to get a serious bill through the General Assembly, a serious redistricting bill. We're going to try again, and I will support that. If we don't do that, though, in this session, if we did it in this session, then you had the 19 election, it would go, and then you passed it again in 20, it would then go on the ballot in November of 20, and if it passed, then you'd have your independent commission for the 21 redistricting. If we don't do this in the 2019 session, then the commission will not be done in time for the 21 thing. So anyway, we do need to fix the problem. I agree with those people with the 2021. But we need to do it in a fashion that's fair to everyone.
Oh, I agree. Do you think the case that's currently in front of the Supreme Court, the Wisconsin case, you know, a decision at the federal level, how would that impact the Commonwealth of Virginia?
Well, it would impact us. Now, here's, you know, in the past, they've allowed gerrymandering. They said it's constitutionally permissible. It is not, however. What they've ruled prior to the Wisconsin case was it's not permissible when it spills over into racial discrimination, which is what created the extra congressional district or the additional Democratic district in Virginia in 2016. That was packed with a large percentage of African American voters, which diminished their influence outside of that congressional district. Now they heavily influence 2 congressional districts. So, but some of these redistrictings have gotten so crazy that now the U.S. Supreme Court is looking at this in perhaps a different light. Now, what somewhat bothers me is they heard that case, I think the Wisconsin case was heard last fall.
Yeah, they haven't rendered a decision.
You know, and some of the remarks made in, I think, the case, the North Carolina case, kind of disturbed me because they were saying, one of the Supreme Court justices, I think, remarked, you know, are we supposed to redistrict all 50 states? So I think they're going to merge those two, and it'll be interesting to see what they say. On top of that, we have 11 of the majority-minority districts, which 10, which are currently under review, and the case has been heard by that 3-judge panel.
Right.
Now, they may rule that, you know, these districts are, you know, racially gerrymandered, and you've got to redo them.
Right.
And that could heavily impact 2019. So there's a whole lot going on in the courts with redistricting that could, you know, if we don't resolve it constitutionally, and we may not, then the U.S. Supreme Court may resolve it for us. And again, I don't have a problem with an independent commission. Some of the bills I voted for, some of them I didn't.
Right.
And if you remember last year in 2019, all of the Democrats in the Senate voted against Suderline's bill because of the way it was worded.
Right.
And the governor vetoed it. So, I mean, we need something, and the redistricting people tell me it needs to be fair to all people.
Right.
Both parties, challengers, incumbents. So anyway, this is
well, it's an issue not just for our state. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
And it's a problem. There's no question about it.
It is, and it's mainly it's a problem because you can slice and dice the data. People know what magazines I order, what car I drive, and where I go to the grocery store. People can look at my data and figure out whether I'm a liberal or a conservative. And that's how in 2010 these computer modelings ended up flipping 14 legislatures in this country because they could carve around houses. So that can't be right either. Somewhere there's got to be a balance where people's needs are met.
No, that's correct.
So in the last few minutes of the show, I just want to talk a little bit about what you see in tomorrow. You're back in session, and the House is back in session on Wednesday, and then hopefully you're going to wrap it up, and we're going to have a
what we
budget.
need to do, A, is get a bill out of committee, either voted out of committee by the committee or by discharging, okay? I told Senator Norman it's something I prefer not to have to do. I prefer to vote something out of committee. He indicated to me that that probably wasn't going to happen. And that failing, we have no choice. I think we get it out of committee, you're going to see Medicaid expansion. And it'll be a pretty good budget. Everybody won't be able to get their own goodies in because we've worked out an agreement with the House conferees as to, we told them these are changes we'd like to see. They've agreed to that.
Right.
Some they didn't. So we're going to send them something that they will accept. If they accept our amendments to their bill, it's game over. There's no conference. The bill goes from there directly to the governor.
Right, and this biennium budget, as you said, it'll be for the next 2 years.
Next 2 years,
but
which we can amend in 2019.
Right.
That's correct.
And
if the economy's doing fairly well, we may be able to do even more with respect to K through 12 and higher ed, which is my two highest priorities. And my next highest priority after we get out of the 19 session is for us to gain control of the General Assembly, because when we do that, I'm looking at two things: the gun issue and taking off some of these highly inappropriate bills that interfere with a woman's right to choose.
Absolutely, and I'm glad you brought that up because I sit on the board of NARAL Pro-Choice Virginia, and there are assaults every day at the federal level with the funding to clinics and the referrals.
I'm going to clean up our code.
Well, I appreciate that.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
Clean up that code of that. That stuff is so inappropriate. It is none of the government's business.
And I'm glad to hear you say that because, I think that should not be a bipartisan issue. Historically, it has been, and it shouldn't have been. But I so appreciate you being here. I think you've helped to shed some light on what the headlines in the newspapers actually mean, because there has been a lot in the Washington Post and the Richmond Times-Dispatch talking about what this reconvened session this week means for the future of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Means a lot.
And I think we're in fairly good hands. I'm feeling very confident, Senator Saslaw.
Well,
are you feeling confident? I'm feeling confident.
Well, as we sit here, I am. We'll see when we get on the floor.
Well,
okay.
I very much appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for joining us. This has been The Inside Scoop with Senate Minority Leader, Senator Dick Saslaw. He has helped us to understand today exactly what you're going to be hearing about in the next 2 days from Richmond as the Senate and the House tackle our biennium budget.
Catherine, thanks.
Yeah, listen,
Okay,
you were
my
awesome.
wife will be there.